Well, Cavs fans, the Celtics are the defending champs, and they exuded their dominance over the Cleveland Cavaliers 112-105 tonight at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Even though they might be the second best team in the Eastern Conference record-wise, they showed that they are still very much the team to beat in this conference and in this league overall. And the Cavaliers coming up a little bit short. But Spence, there's a couple of different angles to attack this thing. Especially with the trade deadline looming, as we know. And I know there's going to be plenty of people who try to use this game as like a barometer for let's blow up the Cavs and trade a bunch of things, and they're just never going to beat this team. I want to start by making it clear, like, I didn't watch this game and feel like the Cavs are like so outclassed that they have like no shot against this team in a 7-game series. There are some things that we will talk about. I think issues or flaws on the team that they can maybe look to address in smaller capacity potentially is maybe a good way to put it. But I'm not going to use this game as any sort of like panic meter barometer for, hey, they need to go do something drastic over the next, 48, less than 48 hours now, I guess, like 36 hours or so. So I think that is the starting point I want to start this conversation, because I know people are going to look at this loss and say, it's the Celtics. You lost to them again. You were down big again, but the Cavs have been down to big against them a couple times the last couple of years, and they've found ways to kind of stay competitive and battle back. I think we saw some of that in that playoff series last year too, where Evan Mobley sort of came to life. So I think they are close. But yeah, like, we can have conversations about what tweaks need to be made, but I don't know that it has to be this like massive indictment on the team because they lost this game.
Right, and you don't want to go for the low-hanging fruit just because you're living in the moment. And you see the score and you're just like, they couldn't get over the hump again. I think that they played a really good defensive game tonight.
Yeah.
And they just could not make shots. And including, to the start, it was a lot of shots around the rim. But as Kenny Atkinson said, though, a lot of that was Kristaps Porzingis altering shots, being there. They could really feel his presence. They didn't do a good enough job tonight offensively, and that's something that you look at. But I also think this is one of those things where two things can be true at once, and you can acknowledge that they do have flaws. They're not screaming out at you flaws, but there are things that they need to figure out, especially positionally between that 3/4 spot. Yeah. I know that they have injuries, and that Max Strus has filled in admirably. You've used Karis LeVert in that spot. George Niang is doing everything he can against some of these tougher matchups, but it just seems like the 3/4 and then the backup big, everything that people have been talking about externally, have shown up, especially when it's the latter half of January, just beginning February, and the dog days, as Kenny Atkinson refers it to. That is kind of where it's showing up at the moment. And who knows, what they're going to do at the deadline. But at the very least, you got to be looking on the buyout market. And there's some names that you can think of that come to mind. But I would really think that this is more about, positionally missing Dean Wade and Mr. Celtic killer himself, I would say.
But I do think that's part of the problem is like you get to a matchup like tonight, and again, not that they couldn't have won this game and not that they weren't competitive. There is something to be said for the fact that I think in all 3 games they've played against the Celtics this year, they've gotten down by double digits, and they've found a way to battle back. And obviously the Celtics tend to, blow big lead. That's kind of been the theme of their team the last couple of years, even though they won a title. So it happens. But I also think, the Cavs don't just roll over and die either. Like, they make that happen. Tonight, there was a couple moments where, like, they got it to 5, they got it to 7, they got it to 5 again, they got it to 4, and that was as close as they got it sort of down the stretch. So they do deserve some applause and some adoration for being able to do that and show that, like, they aren't just going to roll over and go down lightly, and that they do have a good team that can be competitive with this group. But at the same time, like, to your point, like, I think this also was a game that did somewhat sort of show the shortcomings that you do have. And I think you alluded to it, like, without Dean Wade, there's just a big discrepancy with, like, your 3-4 sort of situation in terms of guys that can sort of fill that void when Evan Mobley's not out there, or if Evan Mobley's having a bad night like he did tonight, and that became a big problem. Like, you're almost too dependent on a guy like Dean Wade's been a good player. I don't know that he's been like a great player to the level where, like, if you're in a series with the Celtics, like, he's been streaky at times as a shooter. He obviously has had some injury issues as well, like he's dealing with right now. So it's just he isn't a player that you've been able to depend on, unfortunately, and that's where I think, like, you might have to look and say, like, how can we add to that spot specifically so we have a little bit more flexibility. I said it before we got on here, like the Cavs have a deep roster in general, but they aren't deep at certain key positions that they're going to need in a 7-game series against a team like Boston that they played tonight.
And I think a lot of people are going to look at it too as the redundancy of those kind of bigger guards or like smaller forwards, so to speak, like Sam Merrill, Max Strus. You got Jalen Tyson, who didn't get any PT tonight, but probably should have, I would say.
Yeah, and Kenny Atkinson was asked about that afterwards. Yeah. Like, he said he thought about it. Instead of putting George Niang out there for 25 minutes like he did, and what was George, like, minus 23 or something like that? Yeah,
minus 23. He played 25 minutes. And it's a lot to ask of George, to be fair to him.
And he did say the reason he didn't play Jalen was because in a big game, he admitted, like, this was a big game. Like, in a big game like this, you kind of bank on guys who have been there before, and Jalen just hasn't played on this stage of that level against one of these top teams yet. So I can understand that line of thinking, but also, like, you give him the experience now in the regular season so that if you get to that point in the postseason when you need him, it kind of helps your cause. But continue. Sorry.
It does. No, you're just talking about exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. And, like, Ty Jerome, also kind of that combo guard. He's also played the 3. Kenny's tried some Jared Allen with 4 smalls. He's tried Evan Mobley with 4 smalls.
He said Linus with him, Darius, and Donovan all out there on the floor together, like just 3 guards across the board.
Which he hasn't been afraid to experiment, and that's a good thing. But I think the more that we see, like you said, like, they're so dependent on Dean Wade. And I think that Mike Lucas over at Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show made a really good point about Dean Wade. Like, if you're so dependent on your 8th or 9th guy, like, that is probably not a good sign for a team that's trying to contend for a championship. And, Dean's just had kind of some durability issues since he's been in Cleveland.
Thing,
and, that's the thing that's, I think, ultimately hurt them, because Dean is their kind of do-it-all guy. He's their starting small forward, but he's also their backup 5. He's played the 4. Like, he does a lot of different things for them, and guards too. Not that guarding was a problem tonight. I thought, again, that the Cavs did an excellent job on Jason Tatum. Twice they played Tatum. They've done a really good job with switches, and I mean, that part I think is fine. And again, maybe this is, if Evan has just even a decent night, maybe we're talking about a different story. That's the other part where I think 2 things can be true at the same time. But when you look at the roster construction itself, there is a lot of redundancy, and I think that's what makes this so difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a difficult decision, whatever happens over the next, again, we're saying 36 hours. I don't know what it really is. Math is never my subject.
Thursday at 3 p.m.
And that's all you need to know. But regardless, like, there's that. I think the key part of this too is, like, it's not like at this point you kind of know who Dean Wade is, right? Like, he's been a solid role player for you. I don't know that you should be, to Mike Lucas's point, like, banking on him being the thing that's going to, like, save you in a series against the Celtics. And you brought up, like, the defensive effort was still solid tonight, even without him, even without Okoro. Celtics only shot like 40% from the floor. They were 35 from 3. And the Cavs shot dreadful from 3. They were 28% from 3. And they were, like, just under 40 from the floor. So, like, a lot of it I think was just about shot making tonight. And a lot of that did stem from, as you alluded to, Evan Mobley just having kind of an off night. And Kenny couldn't really attribute as to why. He just kind of said, sometimes it happens. And still obviously trying to kind of get his feet back underneath him. But it was telling, like, Kenny, it was obvious that they just kind of accepted that was the fate for him tonight. Like, because he almost didn't, the only reason he came back into the game in the final 2 minutes is because Max Strus fouled out. And Max was playing the 4. He fouled out. Evan Mobley came back in. He was basically riding out, like, the group that was out there without Evan Mobley, which was Darius, Donovan, Jarrett, Max, and who am I missing? Sam. Yeah.
Yep.
So, he was kind of riding it out with that group, and Mobley was going to pretty much not be back in this game. So that was pretty telling, I think, of just the night that he was having. And it happens, like, it's an off night, but I also understand where, from a Cavs fan perspective, you're probably watching it like, Evan didn't look great against, one of the better teams, one of the teams you're going to kind of measure yourself against. I would sort of point back to what he did in the playoff series last year and be like, we know he can do that. I think tonight was just kind of an anomaly for him. And again, still trying to get back into a full-on, like, rhythm from the calf injury he was dealing with.
Most definitely. And I think a lot of the offensive struggles too from Evan was, Kenny mentioned it. I know that he didn't take too many, but he didn't really stretch the floor.
Yeah, this was a great point from Kenny Atkinson. Like,
Yeah.
They knew that he wasn't hitting those tonight, and so they backed off.
Yep.
And that takes away so much of what he's going to be able to do, obviously.
Yes, and I think you can't really use the excuse of the calf because of the game he just had against the Mavs, and then before that he looked pretty solid and did a good job. So he's still kind of getting acclimated again, but this was Boston being Boston. This is why they are the defending champs. I mean, you look at Karis LeVert; he had a good return game against the Mavs the other day, and ended up not doing well offensively at all tonight. Turned the ball over a couple of times, had 0, I believe. I think he had a goose egg.
No points.
Defensively, he did a good job on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but you got to also credit the Celtics bench. I think you got to give a lot of credit to guys like Peyton Pritchard and Luke Cornett was awesome tonight. They have a really well-rounded team. You can defend them for 20 to 21 seconds on one possession, and then that ball will just end up humming and finding somebody out on the perimeter, and they'll just bury it with a 3. But again, it's not like Boston was burning the Nets down against the Cavs tonight. Like, the Cavs did a good job, and they mixed in different coverages. They tried zone. It worked. Cavs got back in the game. It was like a seesaw affair. That's what I said on Twitter. It was like a seesaw affair between a 15-point deficit the whole time in the second half, and the Cavs kept fighting, and they didn't lay down, but ultimately did not end up having the amount of points.
They didn't have enough. And against a team like the Celtics, that's what is hard against a team like that, because they can get a big lead and then sort of blow that lead.
Mm-hmm.
But they make you have to come back so many times, because they can build it back up so quickly that it just it wears you down and you get exhausted. Like, you just can't ever. It's hard to finish the job when you get close enough. So, they're very Golden State Warriors at the peak of their powers-esque in that way, where it's just like they demoralize you kind of at times.
Cavs have done that too this year.
Yeah, no, 100% they have. But I'm just saying, like, tonight, I think that was on full display from Boston. And 100%. I wanted to bring this up because, again, they shot 28% from 3 tonight. The Cavs did. And I wrote this down. 7 of their worst 3-point shooting percentages of the season for games have come in the last, I want to say it was 13 games, 12 or 13 games. I think it was 12, actually. So a little more than half. And I'm kind of going to equate this to what Kenny Atkinson said after the game, just about, like, this is the NBA. It's February, kind of the dog days, if you will. But I'm curious, like, if this is a just sort of lull, if you will, and guys just aren't hitting the shots, and obviously I want your perspective on this, Spence, or if this is more of like a regression back to like a mean, if you will, for some of these guys who aren't generally shooting as hot as they usually are from outside the arc like they were at the beginning of the season.
Well, I think the shooting with Darius Garland is very real. I think that's not an anomaly at all. I think he's going to stay over that mark that he's at, trying that 50-40-90 club he's trying to be a part of. But Donovan Mitchell's been great on the pull-up threes this year.
I'm less worried about those two.
It's
more so like some of the other guys around them that I think I'm like, is this just those guys kind of coming back down to earth, or is it just like everyone's kind of right now having a little bit of a lull because of where you're at in the season?
Well, it's interesting because it doesn't seem like they can all get on the same page unless they play the Mavericks the day after they trade Luka Doncic.
Yeah, they were.
Because they were shell shocked, but also when you look back at the offensive execution at that game was flawless, basically, and they came out shooting. I think they were 16 of 22 from deep in the first half. So that's another thing though. Like it's
was
hard.
Gonna be the perfect setup for today too, because it was like, oh, you come out, you get to play this like B team.
It's obvious though. Like the differences, are huge, and obviously defensively with Boston. Sam Merrill's found something the last couple of games from deep. Max is still not really himself from beyond the arc yet.
Yeah.
Just kind of up and down in that sense. I think George has been fine from beyond the arc. So it's not like, Evan obviously hasn't been the number one 3-point shooter that they've had to depend on. But if he doesn't make them and teams start to go towards the middle again and not close out on him, then you're going to have to see other guys start making some shots and spreading the floor a little bit better. But I don't know if it's a regression to the mean, but there are ups and downs during an NBA season when it comes to shooting the basketball. But again, I think that was probably the biggest thing I drew from tonight, though, is that they just weren't as crisp offensively. The cutting wasn't quite as much there. And Donovan said that the Celtics made him play 2-on-2 and you kind of just have to pick your poison from there and make the right reads, and
which
it's not easy.
Which was I think that's another good part of this, like make the right reads. Donovan, against this team, you have to be on your P's and Q's at all times. And there was a point at the end of the game,
one in particular,
gets a fast break opportunity with Max, and DG kind of sprayed out with him with one defender back, and he threw it to his left to Max Strus into the wing instead of going right to Darius Garland,
who was wide open.
And I flat out said to you, I was like, in that spot, who do you want taking that three? And you were like, Don.
I was like, oh my gosh, Don, look to your right, look to your right. That's no offense to Max Strus. It's just who had the hot hand in the fourth quarter, in the second half, really, because DG really came alive. Again, come and turn off the corner, using the glass, hitting some pull-up threes, catch-shoot threes. Darius was wide open there on the right wing, and Donovan threw it to Max, and then Max threw it to Evan Mobley, who had plenty of momentum going towards the rim. But then once he saw a little bit of pressure, Evan tosses it, trying to look for Darius Garland in the corner, and ends up getting picked off. So, that's a big point of the game. And, the Cavs, they were down and going into halftime, and it wasn't looking so great. But to Kenny's point, they did fight. They didn't lay down like, you saw against the Thunder. But he obviously understands, and I think the team understands too, that they have not been good enough against the top competition. They still played well, and they've still played hard, I should say. But just they've got to do better to meet the moment in these situations, and I think that's the first thing they're going to look at. But no time to rest though tomorrow in Detroit, which should be a good one. They've lost 4 straight against the top 5 teams in the NBA, essentially. So 2 against the Rockets, the 1 against OKC, and now against the Celtics. In terms of the games against the top teams, they're 0-4 in the stretch that they're in right now. So I think that does kind of set the stage for some questions and some things that maybe they need to address at the trade deadline. As Spence and I obviously alluded to, I guess, Spence, standing here today, knowing the deadline's at 3 p.m. on Thursday, as we already said, what is your, give me a percentage of what you think, are they going to make a move? Aren't they going to make it? So normally I probably would have said, and this is not as a reaction to this game before anyone gets in here, anything like that. No, but seriously, after listening to Kenny Atkinson talk about the culture and stuff like that, the last, couple of games in his pregame or whatever, that is something you would think maybe the Cavs would be 80-20 on keeping their locker room together.
Okay.
However, just after the last couple of games post-game, it just sounded different.
I'm picking up on that
different.
too. And also, Kenny didn't hide from pregame. I know he was asked about trade deadline, and he flat out said something along the lines of you'd be foolish not to pick up the phone, not to listen and see what's out there to make your team better. And he flat out said to make your team better, if you can't as almost insinuating if there's a chance to make our team better, we're gonna take advantage of that. And so I do think that's important. And I'm with you though. There's been sort of a different vibe about Kenny.
It was different.
I think he's kind of realizing some of the stuff we pointed out, that maybe they just need a little bit more to feel like they can get over that hump. So I'm with you. I think that's shifted things. You didn't ever give a final percentage, but I'm gonna say I think it's probably 6. Yeah, I'm gonna say 57. 43.
Okay, do your math.
I was trying to decide if I'm going to do 57 or not. I'm going to say 57-43 that they keep it the same at 57 and 43.
Okay.
They make it.
I do say this though, without regarding to the trade deadline, buyout market, I think will be really busy.
Yeah,
that's where I think that they could, potentially look elsewhere. And you see people that are getting waived, that. Please do not report this or anything like that, but you see names out there, a Mo Bamba that got waived, right? Or Torrey Craig as well as somebody that got let go. So those are the types of marginal moves, but positionally not so marginal moves that the Cavs could look at adding to the locker room. And
if they miss on somebody at the trade deadline, or if they try to take a swing and they miss, those are obviously the options that they'll have at their disposal.
I don't know if there's a big swing in the works. But I mean, we did just see Luka Doncic get traded for Anthony Davis, so I'm not putting anything past anybody. That's the thing. That trade has now made it where it's you got to sleep with one eye open, okay, Cavs fans? If you're going to bed tonight after you watch this video, of course, or even Wednesday night to Thursday,
just keep one eye open. You just never know. That
includes us.
You think the team is staying together, and then the next thing you know, they're trading Jared Allen. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just it's just an example. But yeah, it's crazy world, this NBA that we obviously live in and cover. And we'll see if anything does come to fruition for the Cavs over the next couple of days.
And Donovan too, by the way, on that subject, he was asked about it in the locker room.
Yeah.
And 3 times he said, "We're fine. We're good. We're good. We're good."
What's interesting about that though is, like, I didn't expect Donovan not to say that, but it's also just funny because we remember the former superstar that used to be here, and LeBron, who took the opposite approach to the trade deadline. It was always like he always left the little breadcrumbs of like,
you'd see the facial expressions.
We need to do something, or like he would kind of
you get the
yeah,
and then you get like a little smirk.
Yeah,
like that's that.
He give you something. He gave you the breadcrumbs that they need to make moves. Donovan, before the question was even finished, was like,
"We're good.
No, we're good.
Fine.
We're good. We feel
fine.
good.
We're good."
So he clearly values the chemistry that's here. And but I have said this, like, I want to say they're bulletproof when it comes to like chemistry, because you could break, like, if you brought in like Jimmy Butler. I'm not saying that's going to happen. If you brought in like Jimmy Butler, like, yeah.
How many times have we looked at the camera saying, I'm not saying that it's going to happen.
Sure, I don't want people to take my words and like spin them, but like if you were to trade for like Jimmy Butler, like, yeah, maybe that wouldn't be the best fit. Like maybe that's not the best locker room player you want in this group. But if you this team is very accepting. I think as long as you keep like the core 4 guys together and several other guys, I think they would make it work with others that come in, understanding that like it was done in a way to make the team better. So that's my stance on it. I'm not saying that means they are going to do anything, but obviously, like I said, I'm 57-43 that they keep things stagnant.
Keep your eyes peeled, people. Keep your eyes peeled. That's this time of year, you never know.
Third eye open.
You just see the last couple of days after the Luka move got reported, we saw that De'Aaron Fox is going to San Antonio. We got Zach LaVine going to Sacramento.
By the time we get done with this video, who knows? Like maybe LeBron and Bronny are getting traded somewhere. You never know. So.
That's always his go-to. That's always his go-to.
After Bron just put up, he was having a really big game tonight. Anyway, you can't find LeBron stats at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. Do you have something else?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say before you wrap, I'm gonna be in Detroit tomorrow.
That's
night.
Right. He is gonna be in Detroit. We'll do a post-game hit. I'll be at home.
Hopefully, the event crew there lets me do it on the court or something, because that'd be really cool. But yeah, in a way, post-game show. First time since our boy Megs was out in
LA. Get a Little Caesars pizza while you're there? Isn't that the name of the arena?
It is. It's Little Caesars.
Do they have a Little Caesars in the arena? Do we know?
I'm sure they do.
You need to do your investigative reporting.
I don't know if I'm gonna get a Little Caesars pizza. I might want to get something more authentic. I can tell you this: it's
definitely not as good as the pizzas here at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse.
Shout out to Flower.
Yep. We'll give them a shout out on the pod. Maybe they'll be a sponsor at some point. Anywho, be sure to check out any of our written content. I'm working on a column for tomorrow morning about basically what we just talked about, how I think some tweaks could be necessary for this team at the trade deadline. Over at Cleveland Cavaliers and SI, or si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. And of course, many of you sticking around on the YouTube channel right now where you're watching this, but plenty of other content. Kenny Atkinson spoke tonight. Donovan Mitchell spoke tonight. Jared Allen spoke tonight. And of course, Spence and I's podcast, Courtside with the Cavaliers on SI, or Courtside with the Cavs on SI. I always want to go long form with it. And I can just say Cavs.
At least you can speak tonight.
Yeah, mostly. I just can't breathe, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us, staying up late with us, and we hope to bring you more post-game coverage tomorrow with Spence out in Detroit, and probably me from home or whatever we set up. In the meantime, we appreciate you as always, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.